dive into our mailbag to answer some viewer questions. And that's it. That's all we're doing. This is Genesis Week. Welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the Origins controversy, answering your questions and questioning your answers. Proudly brought to you by the supporters of CORE Ottawa, Citizens for Origins Research and Education, and now carried on the Christinema Network, Christian cinema at its finest. Excellence in Pirate Broadcasting, where we snuck into the Michigan Central Station to broadcast this week's show, continuing to bring you the information the anti-creationists don't want you to see or hear, and we continue to give glory to the Creator while doing it. The Bible does not say, test nothing, hold fast to what you want to believe, but rather the Creator gave you a brain with which to reason. Remember, you can find us in cyberspace at wazulu.com, that's me, or genesisweek.com, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel and get extras like Crevo rants and full interviews with our guests. I'm your host, Ian Juby. We're covering viewer comments this week, so let's get down to business. Woohoo! Mail for me? A couple of weeks back, we discussed the recent paper by Dr. Tompkins revealing the utter bankruptcy of the alleged fusion of two chromosomes in our ancient ape-like ancestors into one human chromosome. Now, unfortunately, I missed providing the reference for which Enrique requested. He then wrote in a very lengthy and technical response on YouTube, and due to time, I simply cannot quote the whole thing, nor Dr. Tompkins' full and very technical response. It all brought Enrique to one point, though, where he wrote, DDX11L2 is a dead protein, which brings me to my question. In the video, you seem quite adamant that if we were to lose DDX11L2, we would, quote, be dead in about a day, quote, end quote. Why do you say this? DDX11L2 has no capacity to function as a helicase. Please clarify. I think you owe it to your captive audience to be accurate with your statements, and perhaps you may wish to go back to them and temper your statements. Otherwise, you may be rightly accused of disseminating misinformation. Best wishes, Enrique. Well, thanks for writing in, Enrique. However, you need to read the paper. When I said without that gene you would be dead within about a day, I was actually quoting Dr. Tompkins and what he said at the ICC conference over the summer. Tompkins specifically addressed all of your comments at great length in his paper. In fact, Tompkins directly responded to your comments, writing, I show multiple lines of evidence in my paper that the DDX11L2 gene is fully functional and co-expressed with the DDX11L protein coding gene in the exact same tissues. I also show that it is related to top-level cellular processes that maintain basic life functions, like cellular signaling and blood cell development. The statements I made stand and do not need to be tempered in any way. With respect, you need to actually read the paper before you criticize it, as it is obvious that you did not do this. The DDX11L2 is critical for life, and without it, you're dead in about a day. Charlie wrote in from Arizona on Facebook. I've been watching Genesis Week videos by Ian Juby. Good stuff. Much like The Matrix, you don't know how far the lies of evolution go until you start looking. I used to think creationists were unscientific. I know better after seeing these videos. Unbelievable. Literally, for people who don't like change. Grenangle chimed in on Twitter. Juby is creationism at its most feeble. He's pretty close to the top of the game, I suppose. Well, we gotta take a 1 minute break at some point. Might as well be now. Stick around.
The Complete Creation video series is just that, an exhaustive look at the science, philosophy, and theology behind the creation-evolution debate. In this 12 DVD series, Ian Juby starts off with a 1-hour presentation for the children in God's Little Creation. He then follows up with almost 11 hours of lecturing for the adults as he walks you through the debate, starting at its surprising history and examining the evidence from biology, geology, physics, paleontology, and archaeology. Chances are, any question you have about the creation-evolution debate is answered in this video series. With open captions for the hearing impaired, the series is both entertaining and educational. There are also free resources, such as question and answer sheets and proctor sheets for homeschoolers. Order your set today online at Ian's Bookstore.
Woohoo! Mail for me? James wrote in on Facebook forwarding some photographs of geology from someone named Theodore. Now, apparently these photos and the interpretation were challenging young Earth creationists who were apparently unable to respond. Now, I have no idea what young Earth creationists they asked, and unfortunately, because I don't know the source nor have permission to use the photos, I cannot use the photos on the show. However, that's not a problem because the claims were actually common, and I've had opportunity to study them specifically. The first one had to do with coal seams in sedimentary layers. Just east of Grand Canyon is Coal Mine Canyon on the Navajo Reservation. We find 3 different layers of coal existing there in between the same sedimentary layers that form the Grand Canyon. How did coal form in 3 different layers during a worldwide flood? Oh, come on! If I was going to challenge young Earth creationists, I would have picked a tougher challenge, like dinosaur tracks in coal. You can find that in a number of places in North America, like Utah, Grand Cache, Alberta, and Hudson's Hope, British Columbia. If the coal and sedimentary layers were made during a worldwide flood, then how did coal with dinosaur tracks get made during a worldwide flood? Were the dinosaurs walking around on the ocean floor? All of this is actually a problem for those who adhere to deep time and millions of years, and not a problem at all for flood geology. Now, in 2006, I was part of a group of 10 young Earth creation geologists and laypersons passionate about geology. We covered 1,000 miles of Grand Canyon region, and one of those places was Coal Mine Canyon. Not one of us ever thought that the multiple coal seams were an issue for flood geology. In fact, watch closely. Coal seams present numerous problems for the ideas of deep time, while a worldwide flood explains it beautifully. First of all, as I mentioned previously on this show and in the Complete Creation video series, there would have been tidal action during the flood, with weeks upon weeks of tidal waves, each one higher than the last. And during low tides, you would have that freshly laid tidal flats draining. Well, during this draining, you would have floating vegetation which gets left behind on the new tidal flat. Coal tends to be made primarily from the bark of plants, which is neutrally to negatively buoyant, but more buoyant than the sediments. So it gets sorted out into sheets, or sometimes it's in clumps. The next tidal wave is higher than the last and makes a new layer of sediments on top of the vegetation. This can happen multiple times, and the buried vegetation becomes coal over time. During those low tides, you have dinosaurs walking on top of the freshly laid vegetation mats, which are technically a tidal flat. That's why coal seams tend to be so huge in extent. They are tidal flats from a worldwide flood. Sometimes those clumps of vegetation turn into what is now clumps of coal, like what we see near Hudson's Hope, British Columbia. None of this is an issue for flood geology. There are, however, many problems for conventional interpretations involving deep time. The conventional theory is that coal is made from swamps, namely peat bogs. Yet coal seams are intersected by polystrate fossils, and the coal seams can be a 1/4 inch thick. Did you have a 1/4 inch deep swamp? Those clumps of coal, did we have a small centralized swamp sticking up out of the ground? The conventional interpretation fails to fit the facts, but catastrophism has no problem explaining any of these findings, even the rapid burial of freshly made dinosaur tracks, which, if you think about it, if the tracks were made in a swamp, the tracks would be ruined in a very short amount of time. Tracks do not preserve well in swamps. It all speaks of rapid deposition and formation. Photograph number 2 depicted a formation very much like this one, and the claim was, in the Grand Canyon and throughout the region, we find evidence of stream bed erosion between sedimentary layers. How did rivers form and erode the tops of sedimentary layers if they were all laid down at one time during a worldwide flood? Well, first of all, such formations are exceedingly rare. In the 1,000 miles of traveling and looking at geology in Grand Canyon region, we saw maybe one such formation. They are exceedingly rare. And if deep time were true, then stream beds and riverbeds should be prolific throughout the rock record. Take a look at modern topography. Your own backyard in town. You are hard-pressed to find an area that is not cut by streams, rivers, and even canyons. Where are all the river and stream beds that should be in the rock record if it really does represent billions of years? They should be especially visible in the hundreds of miles of rock record exposed in Grand Canyon, the sedimentary rocks of which alone are supposed to represent some 330 million years. Do you not think 1,000,000 years is enough time for a river or stream to cut a channel through the sediments? Where is all the erosion from the alleged millions of years? It's not the erosion that's missing, it's the millions of years. Secondly, again, flood geology has no problem with stream and riverbeds in the rock record. Again, referring back to the tidal action, as the tidal waters are draining off the freshly laid and soft tidal flats during the receding tides, the water could very well cause channelized erosion, which would appear as stream and riverbeds. Thirdly, these geological features, including the one given to me on Facebook, are not riverbeds or stream beds. Let's look at the cross-section of a river or stream bed as it would look if it cut through sediments. You get the sediments laid down first. Then the stream or river cuts the bed, and then if that bed were to fill in, it would be filled in with more horizontal layers. Instead, these formations in question are lenses of sediments. That's exactly what they are. The layers, instead of being cut by erosion, actually thin and thicken. Take a look for yourself. Here's one in Utah. Joggins usually has dozens of these lenses exposed, and yes, they erroneously call them river and stream beds there as well. They're not riverbeds. They are lenses of sediments caused by the current flowing this direction, across the lens, not down the channel like a river would. This is also demonstrated by wave ripples in the layers inside of the lens. The wave ripples show the direction of the flow, which is across the lens, not down it as if it were a stream bed or riverbed. Fourthly, these depressions, if you study them long enough, turn out to be bowl-shaped. They are not channels or riverbeds. At Joggins, the continual erosion reveals lots of these depressions, and if you keep visiting year after year, you'll notice they disappear after a few years of erosion. If they were true fossil riverbeds, erosion would simply reveal more of the channel. Instead, the layers become a flat horizon again. The lens was just that, a bowl-shaped lens and not a riverbed. I've had opportunity to personally study dozens of these depressions in multiple provinces and states, and none of them are riverbeds or streambeds. In fact, while I believe that there probably is stream beds and riverbeds preserved in the rock record, somewhere. I have yet to see one, and that brings home the point. If these layers of rock we find all over the world were actually representative of deep time, then there should be bazillions of stream and riverbeds in the rock record. I have yet to see evidence of one. Show me one. Where is all the erosion of the millions and millions of years? It's missing, gone. More logically, it's not the riverbeds that are missing, it is the millions of years that is missing. That is what the evidence shows. Lastly, Theodore provided a photo of some lava beds not far from Flagstaff, Arizona, with the claim, in the area surrounding Grand Canyon, we find basaltic lava flows in between sedimentary layers. Scientists know these lava flows were not created underwater because of the absence of pillowing, which is characterized by pillow-shaped masses forming as the lava quickly cools underwater. How could these lava flows have formed in between layers if the entire area was underwater the whole time? I think I have found the original photograph posted to this blog. I don't have permission to show it on the air, I'm sorry, but like the other two examples, that's not really a problem because I've heard this claim before. For those not familiar with the terminology, these are what pillow lavas look like. Slowly moving underwater lava flows make these bulbous formations which resemble pillows, hence the term pillow lava. They're not the kind of pillows you want to use in bed, however, it's strictly a description of what they look like. Now, my first dilemma with the claim is that there's just not enough information given. The location of the photograph isn't given, and in fact, if you read the blog, the people who took the picture never refer to the black line and claim it's lava, and they didn't even know the formation, calling it either Paleozoic or Triassic. Well, that's a pretty wide margin in terms of an old Earth. Furthermore, that whole area is rife with what we creationists would consider post-flood lava flows. So maybe this layer of lava was made in the air and not underwater. I don't know, because I simply have not been given enough information. However, the typical claim of scientists know is an erroneous statement. As I've heard so many times, so many anti-creationists trumpet, science is self-correcting. Well, if scientists actually know something, then how could they be corrected? This is another fine example of what scientists know that turned out to be dead wrong. What I'm saying is that even if there are not pillow basalts in that layer, it does not necessarily indicate that it was not formed underwater. If pillow lavas are present, then it is a solid indicator that the lavas came out underwater. But, as scientists now know, after observing ocean floor lava flows, pillow lavas are not always formed, even if the lava is underwater on the ocean floor. I know a couple of creationary geologists in the Flagstaff area. If you all would be so kind as to provide specifics about the location, I'm sure one of them would be happy to head up there and take a look, although it may have to wait until spring, as I'm sure Flagstaff is under a lot of snow right about now. Now, as I mentioned, that whole area is covered in what we creationists would call post-flood lava flows. Sunset Crater, immediately northeast of Flagstaff, was a major eruption within historic times. The Hopi Indians have a record of witnessing the eruption of lava, which is why we know that the lava flow is about 900 years old. Now, obviously, we would not claim those lava flows happened during Noah's flood, and yet that's the area these photos apparently came from. Yet radio dating tests conducted on that same lava field produced ages of 275,000 years old, an age too old by a factor of 275. Why is that? I will leave that an open challenge to the adherents of an old Earth. So thanks to James and Theodore for the excellent questions. These were good talking points. Speaking of radio dating lavas in Grand Canyon area, last week we discussed the failure of radio dating on various rocks like the Uinkaret lava flows, only about 100 miles from the Flagstaff flows actually. The local Indians, about 1,000 years ago, actually put corn and pottery into the molten lavas as part of their religious rituals. That's how we know the lavas are about 800 to 1,000 years old. but subsequent radio dates using a variety of radio dating methods returned ages of between 10,000 years old to 2.6 billion years old, a stark indicator of the failure of radiometric dating methods. I also brought up the recent paper on the dating of the Novarupta volcano lava dome in Alaska. Anne wrote in from Ontario. Great show again, Ian. I do have a question with regards to dating the lava. With lava being molten rock, if I remember my lesson from Vesuvius and Pompeii, how can you make a distinction between the rock that formed after the volcano burst and before? Isn't it basically the same material? I'm hoping you get what I'm trying to say. Those rocks have been there since creation. Shouldn't the date all be the same? Well, thanks for writing in, Anne. I'm pretty certain I understand what you're asking. Why would the rock that came out of the volcano have a different radiometric age than the lava pool down below the ground? It's actually a unique answer for each dating method. In the case of Novarupta and the Mount St. Helens tests, the geologists used one of the argon dating methods, either potassium argon or argon-40, argon-39. The argon-40, argon-39 method, known as the argon to argon method, was actually supposed to replace the potassium argon method. Now, in both cases, because argon is an inert gas that doesn't combine with anything, it's assumed that when the lava comes to the surface, that all of the argon in the lava will basically boil out of the liquid rock and into the atmosphere. So, when the rock hardens, it is assumed to have essentially no argon in it, except the same amount as the atmosphere. Now, when radioactive potassium in the rock breaks down radioactively into argon, the argon gets trapped inside the now solid rock. They can measure how much argon is in the rock and take a guess as to how long potassium has been breaking down in order to produce that much argon. The older the rock, the more argon will be present in the rock. Now, what the tests on the Mount St. Helens and Novarupta lava domes showed is that the assumptions are just plain wrong. There's loads of argon in these brand spanking new rocks, and that's why they return ages that are far too old. So that's for rocks for which we know the age. Why on earth should we trust the dating method to give us dates on rocks of an unknown age, when it is obviously very wrong for the rocks of which we do know the age? In fact, this gets quite interesting. I'm going to quote the ever so reliable Wikipedia page on the argon-argon dating method. As long as a standard of known age is co-irradiated with unknown samples, it is possible to use a single measurement of argon isotopes to calculate the potassium-argon ratio, and thus to calculate the age of the unknown sample. Translation: as long as we have a rock of known age, we can compare it to a rock of which we don't know the age and estimate its age. Well, wait a minute. How do you know the age of that standard rock? Well, I'll tell you how they know. They use age assigned to those rocks by evolution. Well, question: what happens when you test the system with a rock of which you do know the age? Well, the answer is evidently a demonstration of just how wrong the system is, because that is exactly what Dr. Shorman did with the Novarupta lavas. We know the age of those rocks because we know when the volcano erupted. Thus, it showed that the argon-argon dating method was wrong, and indirectly showed that evolution was wrong, because that's where the argon-argon dating method got its original age to build its standard. The Earth is not billions of years old. Without deep time, evolutionism crumbles without a hope. But there's really only two options to choose from. Either A, we evolved, or B, we were created. If we were created, then the question naturally arises: who is that creator? What does he want from me? What should I do about this? Does he care about me? Well, the creator cares enough that he came to this earth and demonstrated through his power that he was creator, creating a body to live in as Jesus Christ. Would you rather have a God who is distant and has no clue what it's like being a human being? Or one that is familiar with our sufferings and sorrows by becoming one of us? That is precisely what he did, and performing so many miracles that even his enemies didn't deny it. Yet he still left open that door for those who did not want to believe. But he also warned of the consequences. This world, his original creation, was not like this. This world has been corrupted, and it was corrupted because of our disobedience to our Creator's specific instructions. As a result, death, disease, and sickness has now entered into this world. He said he's going to make a new heaven and a new earth. Do you think he can allow even one drop of sin into that new heaven and new earth? Of course not. But that's a problem now, isn't it? Because every single one of us has sinned. We have done what we knew was wrong to do. Now, if we are forbidden from entering into that new heaven and new earth, there is only one other kingdom to inherit, a kingdom that was never intended for people, but was made for the sole purpose of punishing Lucifer and his angels who rebelled against God in heaven. But if you reject the kingdom of God, then you have only one other kingdom to inherit, the lake of fire, the second death, instead of eternal life. But Jesus died in your place and mine, taking the punishment of death that we deserve in order that we might live. He said that in order to enter into that eternal life, you must be born again. That is simply acknowledging that you've sinned, asking for forgiveness, and giving him your life completely and wholly to him. He has left to go and build us a new place to live, so he wants you to live his life here on earth for him. Why don't you give him your life today? Well, that's it for this week's show. I'm your host, Ian Juby, saying ta-ta for now. I hope you'll join me again next week. Remember, you can send us your comments, questions, and any remaining Canadian pennies to us in a number of ways. You can email us at comments@genesisweek.com or send us a tweet at GenesisWeek. Or you can go to genesisweek.com, which takes you to our YouTube channel, find the most recent video, and post a comment there. Or you can leave a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/GenesisWeekTV. Remember those words of warning from our Creator, Jesus Christ, saying, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me." We'll see you on the flip side.
We are a viewer-supported program and need your support to keep this program on the air. Please pray for us, and if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, K2K 2P4. While we cannot offer tax-deductible receipts outside of Canada, donors wishing to financially support the program can do so online at ianjuby.org/donations, and thank you for your support.